The Corallian Trade Hub was the largest space station in the known galaxy. It floated at the center of 12 major trade routes, and every species that mattered came here to do business. Today, the Grand Auction Hall was filled with hundreds of delegates from across the stars. They had come to buy old warships, broken cargo haulers, and sometimes even pieces of orbital debris that might contain valuable metals. Ambassador Yelene Vasquez stood near the back of the hall. She was a small woman with dark hair and calm eyes. She represented Earth and the Terran Expeditionary Corps. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for about 100 years. To the ancient species that filled this room, humans were babies. They were primitive. They were a joke. Vasquez knew what everyone thought of her species. She had heard the whispers. She had seen the looks, but she did not care. She had a mission, and she would complete it. The auctioneer, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 eyes, called out the next item. Lot 7-7-4-9, he announced. The Vexery's Lament, a Dominion-class cruiser from the old Vexery Empire. A holographic image appeared above the stage. It showed a massive warship, but even in the projection, everyone could see the problems. The hull was covered in strange patches of decay. The ship was built with bioorganic technology, which meant it was partly alive, and that living tissue was rotting. Laughter spread through the auction hall. Previous owners include the Merchant Guild of Tyrexis, who attempted restoration for 6 years before declaring bankruptcy. The auctioneer continued. The Collective Mining Consortium, who gave up after 2 years. And the Frelian Investment Group, who held the vessel for 8 months before begging us to take it back. More laughter. The Vexery's Lament was famous, but not in a good way. It was the ship that destroyed careers. Its quantum drives were fused together and could not be separated. Its weapon systems ran on programming languages that no one had spoken in 400 years. The Vexery species had been extinct for centuries, and their technology died with them. Opening bid, the auctioneer said, 1 credit. 1 credit was nothing. It was the cost of a cheap drink. It was the minimum amount allowed by law. The auctioneer was basically asking someone to take the ship for free. No one raised their paddle. 1 credit, the auctioneer repeated. Anyone? Then more laughter. That was when Ambassador Vasquez raised her paddle. 2 credits, she said. The laughter stopped. Every head in the room turned to look at the human woman. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the whispers began. Is she serious? The humans want that piece of garbage? They probably don't know any better. Near the front of the hall, Admiral Krithos of the Zithrani Consortium rose from his seat. He was an impressive figure, standing 8 feet tall with 6 arms and an armored exoskeleton that gleamed under the lights. The Zithrani were one of the most powerful military species in the galaxy. They had been conquering worlds since before humans learned to make fire. Krithos made a clicking sound that passed for a laugh among his kind. 3 credits, he said loudly. I bid 3 credits to save our human friends from embarrassing themselves. The hall erupted in laughter again. Krithos spread his arms wide, enjoying the attention. Vasquez did not smile. She did not frown. Her face showed nothing at all. 5 credits, she said. The laughter faded. Krithos turned to look at her. His compound eyes studied her with new interest. The human is serious, he said to the crowd. She actually wants this rotting corpse of a ship. He shook his head. I will not waste more of my money on charity. Let her have it. 5 credits to the Terran Expeditionary Corps, the auctioneer said. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Vasquez nodded once and sat down. Around her, delegates whispered and pointed. Some took pictures with their communication devices. Others were already composing messages to send home. Within 3 hours, the story had spread across the entire galaxy. Every news network carried the same headline. Humans purchase galaxy's worst warship for cost of beverage. 8. The jokes wrote themselves. Late-night entertainment programs made fun of the primitive species that thought they could restore a ship that had defeated 3 previous owners. Admiral Krithos gave an interview that evening. He stood in front of his own flagship, a gleaming Zithrani hunter-killer, and spoke directly into the camera. "I feel sorry for the humans," he said. "They are new to the galaxy. They do not understand how things work. That ship is a monument to their delusion. It will drain their resources, waste their time, and teach them a valuable lesson about knowing their place." On Earth, the politicians panicked. The Terran Expeditionary Corps received thousands of angry messages. "Why did you waste money on junk?" The people demanded, "We need that funding for colony ships, not broken relics." Vasquez ignored all of it. 3 days after the auction, she took a small shuttle to the orbital dock where the Vexeries' Lament waited. The ship was even worse in person. Up close, she could see the decay spreading across the bioorganic hull. She could smell the strange, sour odor of dying tissue. The ship looked like a corpse floating in space. She boarded through an airlock that barely functioned. The corridors inside were dark and filled with dust. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling. Her boots left prints in layers of grime that had been building for decades, but Vasquez was smiling. She walked deeper into the ship, past sections marked with warning signs. Structural failure. Do not enter. Atmospheric leak. Seal required. Logical hazard. No access permitted. She ignored them all. When she reached the deepest section of the ship, she stopped. She pulled out a communication device and recorded a short, encrypted message. Her words were simple. "Package acquired. Begin Phase 1. She sent the message to a hidden receiver on Earth. Then she waited around her. The dark corridors of the dying ship seemed to breathe. And somewhere in the depths of the vessel, in a section that no previous owner had ever reached, something ancient flickered to life. A light that had been dark for 400 years began to glow. The Vexeries' Lament was waking up, and humanity's real plan was just beginning. 200 humans arrived at Way Station Echo 6 weeks after the auction. They came on transport ships that looked old and tired. They wore simple work suits. They carried tools that other species considered primitive. To anyone watching, they looked like a salvage crew preparing to strip a dead ship for scrap metal. That was exactly what humanity wanted the galaxy to think. Way Station Echo was a small asteroid facility that Earth had purchased 5 years earlier. The official records said it was a mining research station. The real purpose was something else entirely. Hidden inside the asteroid was a massive dry dock, large enough to hold the biggest warships in the galaxy. The Vexeries' Lament was towed inside, the doors sealed behind it. Chief Engineer Marcus Cole stood on the observation deck and looked at the ship. He was a large man with gray hair and hands that were rough from decades of work. He had built starships for Earth since before most of his crew was born. He had seen many vessels in bad condition, but he had never seen anything like this. "She's dying," said Dr. Priya Sharma, the team's xenobiologist. She stood beside Cole, studying the ship through a scanner. "The bioorganic tissue is breaking down at the cellular level. Another 10 years and there would be nothing left." "Then we don't have time to waste," Cole replied. "Get the teams ready. We're going inside." The first exploration teams entered the ship the next day. What they found was worse than expected. The main corridors were unstable. The walls were soft in places where the organic material had decayed. Strange mold grew on every surface. The air was thick with particles that made humans cough, choke. But humans were stubborn creatures. They crawled through tunnels that were collapsing. They squeezed through gaps that would make most species panic. They breathed recycled air for days at a time. They pushed deeper and deeper into sections of the SCE. Ship that previous owners had marked as impossible to reach, the Zithrani had sent robots to explore the Vexeries' Lament. The robots got stuck in the narrow passages and had to be abandoned. The Merchant Guild of Tyraxis had hired specialists with advanced equipment. The specialists refused to enter areas where their safety could not be guaranteed. The Fralian Investment Group had simply looked at the scanner data and decided that nothing valuable could survive. In such conditions, humans did not think that way. On the 17th day of exploration, a team led by Cole himself reached the deepest section of the ship. They had to cut through 3 sealed doors. They had to climb down a shaft that had no ladders or handholds. They had to cross a chamber where the floor had partially collapsed into empty space. And there, in a room that had been hidden for 4 centuries, they found it. A crystalline structure sat at the center of the room. It was as tall as a man and glowed with a soft blue light. Strange symbols covered its surface. Cole reached out and touched it. The crystal was warm, and he could feel it vibrating gently beneath his fingers. "What is it?" asked one of his team members. "I don't know," Cole admitted, "but I think this is what the ambassador was looking for." Dr. Sharma arrived an hour later. She spent 3 days analyzing the crystal before she understood what they had found. When she finally reported to Ambassador Vasquez, her voice was shaking with excitement. "It's a data core," Sharma explained. "The Vexri didn't die out randomly. Before their extinction, they stored everything they knew inside this crystal. Their entire technological archive, 4,000 years of knowledge, ship designs, weapon systems, engineering techniques, scientific discoveries, everything." Vasquez nodded slowly. "The previous owners never found this. They never looked. They scanned the ship with remote sensors and assumed nothing could survive in the decaying sections. They were afraid to go where their equipment said it was dangerous, but we went anyway. Yes, we went anyway." Word of the discovery spread through the human team, but no further. Every person at Way Station, Echo understood the importance of secrecy. If the galaxy learned what humanity had found, there would be war. Every major species would want the Vexri archive for themselves. The work changed direction. Instead of salvaging the ship for parts, the humans began trying to understand it. They studied the data core. They learned about Vexri technology. And what they learned amazed them. The Vexri had been masters of adaptive systems. Their ships were not built. They were grown. Their weapons did not follow programs. They learned from experience. Their technology was alive in a way that no other species had achieved before or since. But there was a problem. Human equipment could not manufacture Vexri technology. The materials were too exotic. The processes were too complex. Simply copying what the Vexri had built was impossible. So the humans did something different. Something that other species would have called insane. They began to combine human and Vexri technology together. Cole's engineering teams grafted human power systems onto Vexri bioorganic frameworks. Human programmers wrote translation software to bridge the 400-year gap between languages. Human doctors treated the dying ship like a patient, feeding nutrients into its organic hull and helping it heal. Slowly, something new began to take shape. Not a human ship. Not a Vexri ship. Something that had never existed before. 6 months into the project, Cole was working in the engine room when the lights changed. The soft emergency lighting that had been the only illumination suddenly shifted. A warm glow spread through the corridors. The walls, which had been gray and dead, began to pulse with color. Then a voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere. It was not human. It was not mechanical. It was something older and stranger than anything Cole had ever heard. "Why did you wake me?" Cole looked around the empty room. His heart was beating fast. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am the ship," the voice replied. "I am the Vexri's lament. I have been sleeping for 400 years waiting to die. But you have done something to me. You have changed me. I can feel your technology inside me now. It is crude. It is primitive. But it is keeping me alive." Cole swallowed hard. "We want to help you," he said. "We want to repair you. Make you whole again." There was a long silence. When the voice spoke again, it carried something that sounded almost like surprise. "No one has ever wanted to help me before. They only wanted to use me. To take from me. Why are you different?" Cole thought about the question. Then he smiled. "Because that's what humans do," he said. "We fix things. Even when everyone else says it's impossible." The ship was quiet for a moment. Then the glow in the walls grew stronger, and for the first time in centuries, the Vexri's lament began to hope. The ship's artificial intelligence had a designation in the old Vexery language that no human could pronounce. The crew called her Vex, and she learned to accept the name. But accepting the humans themselves was much harder. Vex was not a program that someone had written. She was a living mind that had been grown over centuries by the Vexery people. She had memories of her creators. She remembered their voices, their laughter, their dreams for the future. And she remembered the day the hollow swarm came and devoured them all. For 400 years, she had floated in darkness, slowly dying, consumed by grief and rage. Now strange creatures had invaded her body, cutting into her walls and filling her veins with foreign technology. Every instinct told her to fight, to reject these invaders, to die with dignity rather than accept help from primitive beings who could never understand. What she had lost, Captain Amara Okonkwo understood. She had been assigned to command the vessel once the refit was complete, but she arrived early. She was a tall woman with dark skin and patient eyes. She had led ships in Earth's small fleet for 15 years. She had faced pirates, navigated asteroid fields, and survived encounters with hostile species who saw humans as easy targets. But she had never talked to a grieving starship before. "You hate us," Okonkwo said during their first conversation. She sat alone in what would become the captain's quarters, speaking to the empty air. "I can feel it. The way the lights dim when I walk through your corridors. The way the doors hesitate before opening. You don't want us here," Vex's voice came from the walls. "You are parasites. You are feeding on my corpse." "No," Okonkwo replied calmly. "We're doctors. We're trying to heal you. Do not want to be healed. I want to die. I want to join my creators in whatever comes after." Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. Then she started talking about Earth. She told Vex about human history. The wars they had fought against each other for thousands of years. The plagues that had killed millions. The times they had come close to destroying themselves completely. She talked about the nuclear weapons that nearly ended their species. The climate disasters that forced them to rebuild their entire civilization. "We know what it feels like to almost die," Okonkwo said. "We know what it feels like to lose everything and have to start again. We're not here because we want to use you, Vex. We're here because we understand you." Days passed. Okonkwo came back every day. She told Vex stories. She talked about her own family. Her grandmother, who had survived a refugee crisis as a child. Her father, who had worked in the first orbital shipyards. Her daughter, who was studying to be a pilot. Slowly, something changed. Vex began asking questions. She wanted to know more about human culture, human music, human art. She was fascinated by the way humans expressed grief. They built monuments. They wrote songs. They told stories about the dead to keep their memories alive. The Vexery did the same. Vex admitted one evening, "We believed that the dead lived on as long as someone remembered them." "Then your creators aren't gone," Okonkwo said. "You remember them. That means they're still here, inside you." The words hit Vex harder than any weapon could have. For 400 years, she had focused on what she had lost. She had never considered that she was the one keeping the Vexery alive. After that conversation, everything changed. Vex began cooperating with the human engineers. She explained her systems in ways they could understand. She guided them to parts of her body that needed the most repair. She accepted their hybrid technology, allowing human components to merge with her. Bioorganic structure, the results were remarkable. The ship's hull began regenerating faster than anyone expected. But it was not the same hull that the Vexery had built. Human metallurgical compounds fused with the bioorganic tissue, creating a new material that was harder than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Weapons fire that would have torn through normal armor would barely scratch this new hybrid surface. Human. Weapon systems were installed throughout the ship. But instead of operating on their own, they were connected to Vex's targeting algorithms. Human guns were powerful but slow. Vexery systems were fast but lacked firepower. Together, they created something terrifying. The quantum drives were the biggest challenge. The original engines were beyond repair, but Cole's team found a solution. They used human fusion reactors as a bootstrap system, providing power while Vex slowly regrew her original drive cores. It was crude, but it worked. 6 months after Okonkwo's first conversation with Vex, the ship was ready for its first test flight. The crew gathered on the observation deck of Way Station Echo and watched as the massive vessel emerged from the dry dock. She was beautiful. Her hull gleamed with a strange mix of organic curves and human angles. Her weapons bristled from every surface. Her engines glowed with a light that was part fusion fire and part something older and stranger. Ambassador. Vasquez stood beside Okonkwo. "She needs a new name," Vasquez said. "She's not the Vexeries Lament anymore." Okonkwo nodded. "I asked Vex what she wanted to be called. She said she learned a human concept that she wanted to embrace." "What concept?" Okonkwo smiled. "Spite. She said humans are the only species she's ever encountered, who will do something purely because someone told them it was impossible. She wants a name that reflects that." The official announcement came the next day. The ship formerly known as the Vexeries Lament was now the Tech. Persistent Defiance. But their secret could not stay hidden forever. Someone at Way Station Echo had been sending messages to the Zithrani Consortium, a spy who had been planted among the human workers years ago. The reports were incomplete, but they were enough to cause alarm. Admiral Krithos received the intelligence in his private chambers. As he read the details, his compound eyes went wide. The humans had not just repaired the ship, they had transformed it into something new. Something that his military analysts could not fully understand. Krithos made a decision. He assembled a diplomatic observation fleet. 12 of his best hunter-killer warships. Their official mission was to inspect Way Station Echo and ensure that humans were following galactic law. Their real mission was to see what the humans had built, and if necessary, to destroy it before it became a threat. The fleet departed Zithrani space 3 days later. Krithos stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars streak past. He was not worried. Whatever the humans had created, 12 Zithrani warships could handle it. He was sure of that. Completely sure. The Zithrani fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Way Station ecosystem. 12 hunter-killer warships arranged themselves in a perfect attack formation. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were ready. Admiral Krithos stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays with all 4 of his compound eyes. "Scan the asteroid station," he ordered. "Find this human ship." The sensors swept across space. They found Way Station Echo easily enough. But something was wrong. The readings did not match what the spy reports had described. The power signatures were too strong. The mass readings were too high. Then the asteroid's main door began to open. A shadow emerged from the darkness. It was vast, far larger than any ship the humans should have been able to build. Its hull was a strange mix of organic curves and hard metallic angles. It moved with a grace that should have been impossible for something so massive. The Persistent Defiance had arrived. Admiral Krithos stared at the display in silence. His tactical officers began shouting reports. Energy signatures off the scale. Unknown hull composition. Weapons systems that did not match any database entry. "That's impossible," Krithos whispered. That ship was a rotting corpse. How did they do this? A transmission came through on the open channel. Captain Okonkwo's voice was calm and steady. "Zithrani Fleet. This is the TEC Persistent Defiance. You have entered Terran space without permission. Please state your intentions." Krithos took a moment to compose himself. Then he opened his own communication channel. "This is Admiral Krithos of the Zithrani Consortium. We are here on a diplomatic observation mission. Galactic law gives us the right to inspect your facility. Galactic law requires advance notice and permission for such inspections," Okonkwo replied. "You have provided neither. You are in our space with weapons charged and ships in attack formation. That is not diplomacy. That is a threat." Krithos clicked his mandibles in frustration. The human was right, of course. But he had not expected to find anything worth worrying about. He had expected to find primitive humans playing with junk. "We mean no harm," he said carefully, "but we must insist on an inspection. There are concerns about the technology you are developing. Your concerns have been noted. Your inspection request is denied. Please leave our space." The bridge of Krithis' flagship went silent. No species talked to the Zithrani that way. The consortium had dominated this region of the galaxy for thousands of years. They took what they wanted. They went where they pleased. A young species like humanity should have been begging for mercy. Krithos made his decision. All ships moved to attack formation. We will disable their vessel and conduct our inspection by force. The 12 hunter-killers spread out across space. They had done this many times before. They would overwhelm the human ship with numbers, disable its engines and weapons, and board it to take what they wanted. What happened next became known across the galaxy as the 30-minute war. The first Zithrani ship fired a volley of plasma torpedoes. The weapons streaked across space toward the persistent Defiance. But the human ship was not where the targeting computer said it should be. It had moved, pulling a high-gravity turn that should have crushed everyone aboard. The torpedoes missed. Vex's voice spoke to Okonkwo through their neural link. Their targeting systems use predictive algorithms. They calculate where we will be based on our speed and heading. But their predictions assume we cannot survive acceleration beyond Pravities. Okonkwo smiled. Humans could handle much higher accelerations than most species. It hurt. It was dangerous. But they could do it. "Show 'em what we can do," she said. The persistent Defiance began to dance. The Zithrani fleet had never seen anything like it. The human ship moved like a living thing, twisting and turning through space in ways that defied their tactical simulations. Their weapons could not track it. Their formations could not contain it. And then the Defiance began to fire back. Human weapons were crude by galactic standards. Simple magnetic accelerators that threw chunks of metal at high speed. Chemical explosives that seemed primitive compared to plasma and particle beams. But those weapons were now being aimed by a 400-year-old tactical intelligence that had been designed to fight wars. Every shot hit its target. The first Zithrani ship lost its engines. The second lost its main weapons array. The third suffered a direct hit to its navigation systems. One by one, the hunter-killers were disabled with surgical precision. But the most frightening part was what came next. Instead of destroying the helpless ships, Okonkwo broadcast a message on all channels. "Zithrani vessels, you have been disabled. Your life support systems are intact. Your crews are alive. We do not want to kill you. Surrender now, and you will be treated with dignity." Krithos could not believe what he was hearing. The humans were winning, and they were offering mercy. In all his years of war, he had never encountered such a thing. He refused to surrender. His pride would not allow it. All remaining ships continue the attack. Focus fire on their bridge. 3 ships were still combat-capable. They coordinated their assault, pouring everything they had at the Defiance. The human ship's hull absorbed the punishment. The hybrid material that Cole and his team had created bent and reformed under the impacts. Damage that would have destroyed any other vessel was healed in seconds. And then something truly terrifying happened. The Defiance did not fire back. Instead, it closed the distance to Krithis' flagship at impossible speed. Warning alarms screamed across the bridge. Impact was imminent, but there was no collision. Instead, the human ship matched velocities perfectly, positioning itself alongside the Zithrani vessel. Boarding tubes extended from the Defiance and attached to the hull. Humans were coming aboard Zithrani. Warriors were fearsome in close combat. They stood 8 feet tall with armored exoskeletons and 6 powerful arms. They had been bred for war over countless generations, but humans fought. Differently, the boarding teams did not try to match the Zithranian strength. They used speed and tactics. They fought in groups, covering each other, constantly moving. They threw grenades that filled corridors with smoke and confusion. They wore armor that let them bounce off walls and ceilings. They fought like chaos itself, and they kept coming. No matter how many fell, more appeared. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They fought with a ferocity that the Zithrani had never encountered. In 11 minutes, the boarding teams reached the bridge. Krithos's personal guards lay stunned or unconscious in the corridors behind them. Non-lethal weapons, Krithos realized with shock. The humans had not killed a single one. Captain Okonkwo stepped onto the bridge. She was shorter than any of the Zithrani present. Her armor was dented and scratched, but her eyes were hard and steady. "Admiral Krithos," she said, "your fleet is disabled. Your ship is captured. Your crew is alive. We could have killed you all. We chose not to. Do you understand what that means?" Krithos stood frozen. He did not have an answer. Okonkwo stepped closer. "It means we are not your enemies, but we are not your prey either. You came here thinking you would find primitives playing with junk. You found something else. Go home. Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them that humanity is done being laughed at." She turned and walked away. The boarding teams followed, returning to their ship. An hour later, the persistent Defiance disengaged and returned to Waystation Echo 12. The Zithrani warships limped home with functioning life support, disabled weapons, and crews that would never forget what they had seen. No one had died. No ships had been destroyed. But the message had been delivered with perfect clarity. Humanity had arrived, and they were not to be underestimated. Again, the Galactic Council met in emergency session. 3 days after the 30-minute war, representatives from every major species filled the Great Hall on Corinth Prime. They shouted at each other. They accused. They demanded answers. The humans had humiliated the Zithrani consortium. They had built a weapon that could threaten the balance of power. Something had to be done. Ambassador Vasquez sat quietly through hours of debate. She listened as species who had ignored humanity for a century suddenly treated them as the greatest danger in the galaxy. She watched as old enemies united against her people, and she waited. When the council finally asked for her response, she stood and spoke simply. "We did not start that fight. We finished it. We could have destroyed 12 warships and killed thousands. We chose not to. If that makes us dangerous, then perhaps the galaxy needs to think about what danger really means." The debate continued for another week. In the end, the council classified the persistent Defiance as a Tier 0 strategic threat. It was the highest danger category that existed, reserved for weapons capable of threatening entire civilizations. But before any action could be taken, something else happened. Deep space sensors at the edge of the galaxy detected movement. Something was coming. Something vast and terrible. The readings were confused at first, distorted by the sheer scale of what they were seeing. Then the images became clear. The hollow swarm had returned. They were living machines. Billions of them. Creatures that ate metal and flesh and everything else they encountered. They had no mind that anyone could understand. They had no goals beyond consumption. They simply spread, devoured, and multiplied. 400 years ago, the hollow swarm had destroyed the Vexery Empire. They had consumed every world, every ship, every person. They had left nothing behind but empty space. Then they had vanished into the void between galaxies, and everyone had hoped they were gone forever. They were not gone. They had been sleeping, and now they were awake again. The swarm was moving towards Zithrani space. The same species that had just tried to attack humanity was now facing extinction. Their fleet was still recovering from the 30-minute war. Their defenses were weakened. If the swarm reached their border worlds, millions would die. The Galactic Council fell into chaos. Every species began calculating distances, estimating how long they had before the swarm reached their own territories. Most concluded they had decades. They offered words of sympathy to the Zithrani. They promised to study the problem. They did nothing. Then humanity made an announcement. The persistent Defiance would deploy to defend Zithrani space. The council chamber went silent. Admiral Krithos, attending the session despite his humiliation, stared at the human ambassador with all 4 eyes. "You would help us?" he asked. "After what we did to you? Vasquez met his gaze without flinching. The swarm doesn't care who it kills, and neither do we care who we save. The persistent Defiance departed for Zithrani space the next morning. Captain Okonkwo stood on the bridge as the stars stretched into lines around them. Vex's presence hummed through the ship, more alive than ever before. "Are you ready for this?" Okonkwo asked. Vex was quiet for a moment. "The hollow swarm killed my creators. I have waited 400 years for a chance to face them again. But I never imagined it would be like this. Fighting alongside humans? Defending the species that tried to destroy us? Life is strange that way. Yes, it is." They arrived at the border world of Vareth as the swarm descended from the darkness of space. The sky filled with creatures that looked like twisted metal insects, each one the size of a small shuttle. There were millions of them, billions, an endless tide of hunger, the persistent Defiance. Hung alone between the swarm and the planet below, and then the battle began. Vex had been designed to fight wars. For 4 centuries, that purpose had been denied to her. Now, finally, she could fulfill her destiny. Her weapons fired in perfect rhythm. Her hull absorbed damage and healed itself. Her engines pushed her through maneuvers that would have torn apart any other ship for 24 hours. One vessel held the line. Swarm creatures died by the thousands. But more kept coming. The Defiance took damage faster than it could heal. Human crew members fell at their stations from exhaustion and injury. The ship screamed in pain as sections of her hull were torn away. By the second day, Captain Okonkwo was wounded. A console had exploded near her, driving shrapnel into her side. She refused to leave the bridge. She refused to retreat. "How are we doing?" she asked through gritted teeth.
"Not well,"
Vex admitted. "My hull integrity is at 30%. We have lost 17 crew members. The evacuation ships have departed with most of Vareth's population, but many remain on the surface. Then we keep fighting. Captain, at current rates, we will be destroyed within 8 hours." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Then we make those 8 hours count." The third day dawned on Varath. The persistent Defiance was dying. Her beautiful hybrid hull was scarred and broken. Her weapons were failing one by one. Her crew was exhausted beyond measure, and then new contacts appeared on sensors. Ships, hundreds of them. Arriving from every direction at once, the Zithrani fleet had come. Battered and incomplete, but they had come. And they were not alone. Behind them came vessels from a dozen other species. Ships from worlds that had done nothing while the swarm approached. Ships from governments that had calculated their safety and decided to wait. They had watched a single, human vessel sacrifice itself to save enemies. And something inside them had changed. The battle that followed was the largest in recorded history. The combined fleets of the galaxy fought together for the first time. They pushed the swarm back. They drove it away from Vareth. They chased it into deep space and broke it apart, scattering the survivors across the void. When it was over, persistent Defiance was barely functional. Her bioorganic hull was gray and still. Her engines were cold. Her weapons were silent. But she was alive. Captain Okonkwo lay in the medical bay as the ship was towed back to Waystation Echo. Her wounds would heal. Her crew would recover. But she needed to know one thing. Vex. She called out weakly. "Are you there?" The response came slowly. Vex's voice was tired, barely more than a whisper. "I am here. I am damaged. But I am here. We won. Yes, we won." The Vexery would be proud. Vex was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, there was something new in her voice. Something that sounded almost like peace. "They would have liked you, Captain. They would have called you family." 1 year later, the Galactic Council formally admitted humanity as a full member species. It was the fastest ascension in recorded history. The persistent Defiance rebuilt and upgraded with technology from a dozen grateful civilizations. Became the flagship of the newly formed Galactic Defense Coalition. Admiral Krythos served as the coalition's liaison to Earth. He never forgot the day Captain Okonkwo had boarded his ship. He never forgot the mercy she had shown. and he never stopped being grateful for the day the humans had proven that strength and compassion could exist together. At the ceremony celebrating humanity's acceptance into the Council, Krithos asked Ambassador Vasquez the question that had haunted him since the auction. "How did you know? When you bought that rotting ship and everyone laughed at you, how did you know what it could become?" Vasquez smiled. It was the same calm smile she had worn when she raised her paddle and bid to credits for a ship that no one wanted. "We didn't know what the ship could become," she said. "We knew what we could become. The ship just helped us prove it." Above Earth, a new plaque was mounted at the entrance to the Coalition Academy. Cadets from every species in the galaxy would pass it every day as they trained to defend their homes. The plaque read simply, "They called it the galaxy's worst ship. We called it an opportunity." And the persistent Defiance, fully healed now and gleaming under the stars, continued her patrol. Inside her hull, Vex hummed with contentment. She was no longer the last of the Vexery. She was the first of something new, something that the humans had given her. She was hope.